One of the interesting things is that there is a framework for coming up with startup ideas. One of the frameworks is, I work at this big company. We built this internal tool to help our company do this thing better. Let's say you're Google and you have, internal search, and it makes all your employees 10x more productive. That same problem probably applies to every other company, but they don't have the search experts at Google to build it in their company. So if they can benefit the same, but they don't have the expertise, what if we built search software for our company and other companies that isn't Google? Can that be big, right? And there are companies that do that, but it's just an idea of it doesn't have to be problems in your own life. It could be problems that your company or your job is facing. The idea is that you want to extract something small or something valuable that exists within one particular ecosystem and see if it can apply to others.
Welcome to GWP. Super excited to have you on here. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. It's a beautiful Sunday.
Yeah.
And, I appreciate you taking the time to come out and speak to us.
I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. All right, let's do this. So, been looking forward to this conversation. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is definitely about your founder journey.
Okay.
You're a founder, but before becoming a founder, you had other endeavors that you've taken. And so would love to hear more about that, especially, Georgia Tech, and all these other places, Florida, where you went to school as well. Talk to us about that journey and how, that led you to becoming a founder, which is where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been building products pretty much since I was 14. First product I built was, it was like a computer science fair project. I had taken my first programming class. I was fixing people's computer. And after taking my first programming class, I was like, I can automate a lot of these things that I'm doing. And it was just like a fun thing to do. I was like, okay, I took computer science. I've been doing this business. Let me try it out. And so I did that, ended up winning science fair. And where I'm from, most people haven't even graduated college. My parents didn't graduate college, first generation. And so to me, there was this new craft where I could sit down at the computer and make money. I was like, this is crazy. This is super cool. So I'm going to go to school and learn this. And this is what I'm going to do full time. And then I remember kind of thinking deeper about it. And I was like, wait, let me actually think intentionally about my career. So I went on the internet and I looked up the richest people in the world. And there were three kinds that I saw. It was computer scientists, it was finance people, and pharma people. And all the computer scientists were young. And I said, okay, that's perfect. This is what I'm going to do. So I went to school, studied computer science and applied math. And I've had the idea to build a tech company for a long time. I wasn't sure what I was going to build, but I was always open to it. And that's why, I studied that in school. And that's kind of what has been the underpinning for my whole career. It's just that passion, that urge to build things.
Yeah. So you talk about, being first generation and going onto the internet, looking at the richest people in the world. I'm very curious, how did being first generation influence your decision making, whether it's personally and also financially, right? Because here you are thinking about the richest people in the world, but you're probably looking in your community and you don't see people that you can resonate with, right? Because I'm sure there are young adults like you and I that are probably looking around and trying to figure out what they want to do. And sometimes when you see people that look like you and you look at the richest people in the world and, you see one that looks like you, it's like, oh, wow, this is where to go. Or if you're looking within your inner community and you're seeing, this person in my family or that person in my outer family looks exactly like what I want to be, you get that extra inspiration. But in your case, you're probably looking at external factors to make that decision. How did that influence you?
Yeah, I think I was the right combination of smart and naive, right? Where I didn't think that deep about it. I just, in my mind, I saw other people doing it and thought it was possible, but I didn't factor in kind of all the things you were saying. Are these people like me? Have they, gone to the same school as me? Do they have the same background as me? And in many ways, I think it would have been very beneficial for me to consider that early, but I just didn't. And that was also beneficial because it's one of those things where at the time that I joined, there probably weren't that many figures in tech doing what I wanted to do. But by the time I graduated, started my career, and wanted to start a startup, there were those figures there, and I already had that head start. So they kind of paved the way before I really came onto the scene. But in terms of my background being first generation, I'd say though what I did have is people in my life who I felt were very influential in that they took a really big risk, and it had a drastic direction change for their lives. And so for my mom in particular, she never graduated high school. And when we moved here, that was a really big risk for her, right? It was me, my brother, and my little sister. Well, she was still pregnant with my little sister, and she just moved to America. And like, part of that decision, her family and friends were like, hey, like, is it a great idea to go to this foreign country where you don't speak the language and to bring your kids with you? Right? That's a really big decision. It's a hard decision. She decided to take us anyways. And that's because she really wanted us to have good influences and to have a chance here in America. And that decision paid off really, really well. Like, she put, 3 immigrant children through college, fully funded. And in many ways, that decision that she made was like really bold and courageous, and she committed to it and she made it work. And there were really crazy conditions that she had to kind of weather. But I think, like, when I think about my journey going into tech or even building a startup, it's just like this massive endeavor where it's so big and it's so vast that you don't know where it's going to go. And the only way to really do it is to just start and see how it goes. You know what I mean? Right. And just to have faith in yourself. And at the end of the day, right, like, I feel like people who are really passionate about something, you can figure it out. Like, whatever it is, you can figure it out. But like, getting started is actually really scary, and it's the first step. And so I felt like I learned that being a first generation immigrant, because I only had this shot to do this because of that background. And now I have the ability to be the next large stepping stone.
Yeah. No, that's really awesome. And it's great also, right? Because even though you don't necessarily have that richest person in your family, you're probably looking at your mom and the risk and, the opportunity she's given you. And that in itself alone is a huge advantage. And sometimes we don't look at that, right? Yeah. Because we're, again, looking at these external factors and trying to figure out, okay, there's this guy building it in his garage and I should be the same and so on. But you have all these inspiration that you can just tap in and, and that alone, that can get you so far. So definitely. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so kind of reflecting on your background and before you get to where you are now, where you're the founder of Outin, you didn't just start to become, a founder, right? You started somewhere. You worked at Airbnb, you worked at Bloomberg, which I will mention I'm a current employee of, right? And Airbnb, Bloomberg, and did you work anywhere else as well?
Yeah. So my very first internship actually happened by like luck. So I was on campus and I ran into this kid. He was lost. And we ended up chatting and becoming really good friends. And his mom was running a startup at the time. So he was like, why don't you come to Washington, D.C.? And it was like really scrappy. Like, they had a really nice house. I think it was like 6 rooms, XYZ. He was like, why don't you come to Washington, D.C.? My mom is leaving Microsoft. She was this exec. Now she's working on this startup. Why don't you just come live with us and build it with us? And I was like, okay, that's cool. Let's do it. So I just went and I was working with them. And that was my first internship. And I think like, right, corporate America, everyone needs kind of their big break, right? Like however it comes. So for me, that was it, where I had like this, professional experience on my resume that kind of allowed me to get more internships. And then my next internship was at Lockheed Martin, middle of nowhere, but it was a more legit internship where I was working for Lockheed, one of the biggest companies in the world. And that was an incredible learning experience. And then after that summer, I worked at JP Morgan, subsequently Bloomberg. And so, I would say for all of those all of those, I learned something completely different from each and every one of those internships. So the Lockheed was kind of like, working in government.
The bureaucracy.
The bureaucracy could be a thing. And like, I just honestly wasn't satisfied there. And I kind of thought to myself, I was like, man, like, this is going to be my career. And like, if this is the experience, do I really want to like stay and be a computer scientist? And because I just felt like I wasn't challenged, right? Like I was really, I worked, my projects weren't huge. I wasn't really programming that much, even though, that's kind of the internship I expected. And at the end of it, I thought to myself, I was like, you know what, let me try this. I have this experience now. Let me try to aim for the highest possible thing that I can and see what it's like there and then make a decision. And so my next internship was JP Morgan. Completely different. So at Lockheed, I was in the middle of nowhere, working in a gray cubicle.
Yeah. Where was it located at Lockheed?
Morristown, New Jersey.
Okay.
And so like I, at one point, was biking to work every day because public transport would take 2 hours to get there.
Wow. And
I couldn't rent a car because I wasn't old enough. And I don't have a driver's license. And then, and so I was like, man, okay, either I have to literally Uber every single day to work or I need to find some alternate travel. So I was like, okay, I'm going to bike. And so for like 2 weeks, so I bought this bike. It was like $200. And for 2 weeks, I biked to work every day. Came drenching in sweat. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to ride this bike till it pays itself off in terms of what I would have spent on the Uber. And I'm throwing this thing away. I'm going to Uber some more. But so yeah, I was in Morristown, New Jersey. I was in the middle of nowhere. Great cubicle. We had to leave our phones in a cubby in the front.
Wow.
And yeah, man.
Top secrets, huh?
Yeah, it was top secret stuff, and it really wasn't that fun. And so my next internship was at JP Morgan, completely different. Now I'm in the city. I'm in New York. I'm working in finance.
You sold that bike at that time.
I sold that bike. And now there's a Subway and I get to work in a Jiffy and I'm living in Harlem and it's really cool. And so, and my actual work is challenging and I'm working with people that, inspire me and I'm excited. And so, just giving it that shot was really important. And, part of me working there was I studied way harder for interviews. I interviewed at way more places and it made a difference. And so that's kind of like, that was kind of my journey into software engineering. And then the next place was Bloomberg. And it was like what I felt at JP Morgan times two. Like everyone's, the intellectual curiosity is amazing. The projects that I got were hard to where like at the face is like, can I do that? You know what I mean? Like, and so, so when you wake up every day, you go to work and you're not sure if you can do the thing because it's a big project. That's really exciting because at the end, when you're done, you feel a sense of accomplishment. And so, those internships were all, really cool. And each and every one of them, fortunately, I got to work on a new product at each and every one of them. So I had the ability to actually build things as scratch as you can from within a company. And so, it was like nice training wheels for starting a startup in some ways, at least, in the perspective of building the product.
Yeah. Are there, besides the bureaucracy at Lockheed Martin, but are there other things that you learn in these internships or in these jobs that surprised you about yourself? So, and not even sure if it surprised me or if it reinforced what I knew, but showed me how important it was. So I have these periods of time where I can be incredibly focused, completely locked in, just operating on a different level. And I have these times where it feels like I can't even be bothered, right? And I realized that for me, my ability to output, my ability to achieve at a very high level is gauged on my interest level, how interested I am in the thing. And so at every internship, what I realized is as my projects got more exciting, as they got more difficult, as I was more challenged, I did way better. And that's because I was fully invested. I was fully in. And so I think that surprised me. And that's part of what led me to doing a startup, because I felt like in corporate America, even though, I achieved a lot, I felt like I was never really playing on hard mode.
I felt like I was doing enough to do well, but I never was like, I guess, maximizing my potential because, right, like now I work into the night and I love doing that. And then I wake up and I'm thinking about the company and I'm working from 6 to night and I'm solving really hard challenges and I'm motivated every single day to do it. And so I think that was the thing that surprised me, was that like how much the nature of what I'm doing affects my ability to work. Because I think, some people can just think maybe I'm lazy, right? Like, I'm sure some of my coworkers thought like Andrew's kind of lazy.
He's slacking off.
He's slacking off. Yeah. And it's because I'm just disinterested, man. Yeah. It's just like, this is not exciting for me. This is not fun for me. And so I think just my personality, that's what I started to learn about myself. And like, I think the best thing you can do is like fully understand yourself, figure out what's the best environment for you to thrive.
Yeah. One thing I really like about your story too is the intentionality of it. So you started with an internship and you realized and said, you know what, I kind of want to do something more. I want to shoot for the highest thing and see what it's like. For many people, once they get that one internship, they're coasting, right? All right, I arrived, I'm here.
Yeah.
But for you, you were intentional in saying, you know what? I've seen this. I don't like this. I like that. I'm going to try to find something else and see what else I can discover. It's almost like for you, that discovery never stopped. And you were kind of like on this journey of discovery. And clearly that hasn't stopped. And that's led you to your company, which is Outin. So tell us about how, all of these sort of stops that you made along the way, whether it's buying a $200 bike and, biking through the rain and all this kind of stuff just to get to work. And then finally coming to the realization that, you know what, I can do this on my own. I'm out of here.
Yeah. So early on, I kind of figured that like for the highest level things, most people probably believe it's unachievable. So they're probably not even trying for it in the first place. Yeah. So my idea was that like, if you just aim ridiculously high, it's less competition by default, right? And so I always intended to start a startup. And I always knew it was going to be a incredibly difficult challenge. But my mindset was, well, only a few people are crazy enough to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder though, so was your intention to start a startup from the get and you kind of work your way backwards by, becoming a software engineer and then getting the experiences at all of these like top firms? So at these points, are you kind of like learning how they operate? Are you learning the product? Are you learning the language they speak? And then finally you're like, all right, I got all the tools that I need. I'm ready to start. Was that kind of the mindset? How did you go about it?
Yeah, definitely. So first, I was incredibly curious all the time. And I think that led me to getting the internships in the first place. So while I was in college, I wasn't just taking my classes. I was trying to build stuff, like build my own stuff. And so, build my own apps, run kind of mini companies and stuff like that, or mini businesses. And in the process of doing that, I just became interesting to the people interviewing me, because it's like, tell me about a time where you faced a challenge. I'm not talking about a school project. I'm talking about this app that I built when I couldn't figure out how to market it. So I took it and I went to a club university or something and I tried to recruit people. And like, okay, to recruit people, I needed it to work in a certain way. So I went home and I built this feature, and this feature was hard. And so I did it. And so I just became really interesting because I was naturally curious, and that led to a lot of the internships. And in terms of, how intentional I was versus what just kind of happened, my only level of intention was, my only kind of level of intentionality was, I need to be able to program to build something.
Yeah.
After that, I'm still an immigrant. I still need money. So when I think about internships, I'm kind of like, I want to build my own thing this summer, but I need to go get some money. So I'm going to take an internship. And to me, doing an internship was also important because you need credibility in the world, right? Like, for people to take you seriously. And so I wouldn't say I went there trying to think like, how are they building things? Because I was already doing that. I'm on the internet. I'm reading books. I'm like reading the origin stories of large companies. And so I went more so, I guess, with the idea of like, I need to do this to be someone in the world so that I'm trusted, right? Like in terms of funding or in terms of gaining team members. And so I would say that like, I just started off from my curiosity, and the internships were, I worked really hard to get the internships. So I'm not saying like I just randomly got them or anything, but I'm saying that I didn't get them thinking that I was going to leverage it to build a company, because I was already learning how to build stuff. It was more so, these were like real life moves that I needed to make for life reasons,
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about Alden.
Sure.
Right. So you started building all this stuff in college, right? You're at these interviews and they're asking you, tell us about a time you had a struggle, and you're like, actually the struggle is the app that I'm building. And these guys are like, hold up, the what? And so how did all of that lead you to build Alden? Because when I think about Alden, it seems like the spirit of it is bringing people together, having a good time. Really love that. And this one interview from Sam Altman that you may have posted, that said, in a few years' time, one of the things people are going to be craving for is that connection. We already saw that after COVID, right? Travel is at an all-time high right now because people are looking for that connection, whether they're traveling to connect with their families and find things. But you went out and built Alden. So, tell us, what is the inspiration behind building Alden?
Definitely. So like I said, have been curious for a long time. And I think one of the things that I've been curious about is understanding like human nature, why we do some of the things we do. And so, I would just read psych books. And to me, it was super apparent that socializing was incredibly important for our development in general. Like you have to do it. So that was in the back of my mind. And then, I'm also reading about startups and how they work, X, Y, Z. And so that's all in the back of my mind. And I'm in New York, and I'm with my fiance at the time, and we're celebrating our anniversary. And we've been to all the restaurants in the city, and we're trying to think of what we can do together to really celebrate. We ended up going jet skiing, and it was the most fond experience we had in our entire time in New York. And we talked about it for years later. And I was thinking to myself, we were in this city for 3 months. We had great internships. We made money. Why didn't we do more things that made us feel that alive? That memory that we had, that we talked about, we could have done more things in that spirit. And I realized that like when I planned it, it was a pain. It was such a hassle. And that's the reason why we wait for these special occasions, because it really requires a lot of activation energy for you to be like, all right, I'm going to go research on Google for hours. I'm going to look up all these different suppliers. I'm going to call them. I'm going to talk to them on the phone. I'm going to figure out the price. I'm going to book it. We're going to go. Right. But if you can shrink that down to where it only takes a few seconds, right? Like now it's just a weekend and my brother's in town. Let's go do something. I'm with a group of friends and I don't want to drink this weekend. I want to have fun, but I want to do something that fills my spirit up in a different way.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that seems really valuable, really useful, and there's no great product for it right now. My intention in the beginning was not to build a company because it seemed like a really big problem.
Yeah.
Right. In order for this to work, marketplaces are tough. I need to find a bunch of suppliers. Then I need to be able to acquire users, and I need to build this really complicated software that can do booking and payments and all these other kind of things. So I joined Airbnb to work on the experiences product, because to me, it seemed like they were solving it really well. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm just joining this company. They're solving it really well. Two things are going to happen. Either they're going to grow and I'm going to grow with the company and I get to build this problem that I see, or I'm going to notice that, they aren't doing it right, or the way I originally thought about the problem and what I'm trying to solve it for, if they're not building it towards that direction, I can do that. And so that was the original inspiration, just trying to solve that problem, realizing one, how important it is because of the background that I've kind of had, understanding human nature and how we thrive as a collective, and how to build a connection and to build memories, we need to do things together. To tangibly seeing it happen with my partner at the time and realizing we could have done that way more often, because at the end of the day, eating is just a shared activity.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of different activities that you can do together. And there's some that give you a wider range of emotion. Do you really know someone when you haven't seen them scared, tired, happy, sad? Like, then you really get to understand them when they're annoyed. And so when you're go-karting and you're competitive and you want to win, or, you know, and you don't win and you're angry, like, what are they like?
Yeah.
You know, really getting to know people. There's a wide range of activities you could do. And so that was the idea there, was if I can make that accessible to people, that will be really valuable. And solving that problem would be really valuable. And seeing it tangibly happen in my life and seeing the value and the benefit. We talked about this thing years later. We went to hundreds of restaurants.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that we kept talking about. And so it's like, okay, I think there's a lot of value here. And if I could build something, it'll be really useful.
Yeah. So talk us through the journey, right? You know, coming out to build Outin, because you didn't take that step alone. It looks like you decided to build with a group of people.
Yeah.
And so tell us about that journey. Is it much easier to build something alone, or is it better to go with a group? Because there's a saying that if you want to go fast, you go alone, right? And if you want to go far, you go with a group of people.
Right.
Seems like you're a smart guy. You probably want to go far, kind of like how you got your bike and you were kind of biking. You want to definitely be able to go far. But how important was it to be able to start with a group and, you know, talk us through that journey?
Yeah. So first thing, I think for most entrepreneurs, there is probably a period where you are alone, where you have the idea and you think it's valuable and you haven't recruited people yet. For some people, it's a shorter window. For some people, it's a longer window. So I did start alone for a bit. While I was at Airbnb, I was thinking about this problem space and how, like, you know, Airbnb experiences, Viator, Get Your Guide, they're great for traveling. When you're traveling, you know, you think to use these platforms to book excursions, but when you're local, you don't even think to use these platforms. Their penetration is really low and the type of things that you have to do are different. And so I started just thinking about this problem myself. I built landing pages. I showed people. I did user interviews. I messaged random people on LinkedIn. What do you think of this? XYZ. Walk me through your process, XYZ. And then I was fortunate enough to be talking to two friends about the idea. And they were really excited. And they were like, I'm going to come to San Francisco and build this with you. And so to me, I started off alone, but I knew that in order to build this thing, I would need other people.
Yeah. How important was it to be able to get those people on board, though? What is that talk like, right? Is it, I'm building this thing out. If you want to pull up, just come through. Or was it, you know, did you have to craft that story and be able to get these people on board and make them leave whatever they were doing in wherever they were, whether they were in Florida or, you know, whichever place they were, and say, you know what, I'm going to come to San Francisco and then build this with you?
I think it's amazing when you get the opportunity to build things with friends and when your friends are really high quality people. And that's the opportunity that I had. So both of the people that I built with were friends that I've known for some time. So one of them, I knew him since he was 14.
Nice.
We met playing League of Legends online. Wow. We stayed friends for a really long time, and we would always talk about computer science and entrepreneurship. And he was doing like AI research, XYZ. And so I thought about what skill sets were important for the business. And then those are the people that I really was like excited to talk about with the product, just to get their perspective. And so luckily he was like, this is super cool, I'm joining. And so that conversation was really natural. It was just like, this is what I'm building. I think this is important for it. What do you think? And I'm walking him through the problem, and I'm telling him about what I'm finding. And he's like, you know, we have such a good rapport. We've talked about so many things that the fact that he sees me this excited about it and about to take that leap, he's excited. And, you know, we're young guys. I'm in Silicon Valley. I'm like, come to Silicon Valley, let's build a startup. It's just exciting. And so he's like, all right, let's do it. And my other friend, I'd known him since undergrad of college. And we'd actually built things together. So we built apps together. We published it at App Store. We've done hackathons. We've run programming competitions together. So we're just tough together. When we get together, we win. So I started telling him about the product as well. And to be honest with you, I'm not even sure he fully bought into the idea. He was just like, Andrew's one of the smartest people I know. He's really excited about this. Whenever we get together, we make magic happen. That's all he needed to know, and he was going to join. So that's why I'm fortunate, like I said, to have friends, because I think startups, what makes them interesting is they are an experiment. There's some part of it that is untested, that is unconventional. So the vast majority of people are not going to believe it at face value. And so that's where rapport matters, right? Like he was just excited to work with me because we've been good friends for a while. He has a lot of trust in me. And obviously I walk him through the whole idea, through the whatever, but that doesn't mean someone's at 100% conviction, but he still decided to make that leap. And so I was lucky in that way to have good friends that I knew that we had rapport. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so exciting. So one thing you just said that I kind of want to dive into is, how you just said startups, they're untested and so on. If someone is listening to our podcast right now, they're like, man, Andrew, this guy is inspiring me. I feel like starting a startup tomorrow, right? But they're probably also thinking, I need to come up with that brilliant idea. I need to be, come up with that thing that people see and they're like, wow, right? How do you go about coming up with that sort of innovative idea, right? Because for you, listening to your story, you tapped in with your own experience, kind of something you guys experienced. You realized there was a gap and then you stepped up to solve that problem, right? Maybe someone is not thinking about it that way. Maybe they haven't had that experience where maybe they go out to New York and they're trying to do something and, they realize there's a market.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you kind of come up with that, craft it, and finally be able to convince two friends to come in and build with you?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's two things that are really important. The first is like background and context. So before I built my product, I researched Snapchat. How did it start? What were they working on? Why were they working on it? Why does it work? Why can it get big? I learned a lot of very surprising things. I think it was like they worked on like 12 ideas or something like that before this particular one took off. And so, how Facebook started, I just looked into it, how Airbnb started, how Uber started. I just went so deep in these companies that when I noticed my problem, it was very easy to kind of start doing the mental math of, okay, well, I know all of these startups started in this way. There was a small problem. And then this is how they extrapolated how big it could be. And I'm just naturally doing the same thing. And I'm looking at every problem I have in my own life and applying that framework. And so the first thing was the background and the context from just being super curious. I would say the first thing is just to be curious. How do things work? Like I would walk into a grocery store. I'd be like, it's stocked to the brim. There's like two people in here right now. How are they making money? Like I'm curious and I'm diving into the business model, how it works and all that. And so I would say that's the first thing. And then the second thing is we all have problems in our everyday lives. The thing is we become insensitive to them. A lot of us, our problems like repeat, like we have the theme of the same type of problems throughout our lives. And over time, we just become like insensitive to that problem. It's just the way of life.
Yeah, you just become immune to it.
Exactly. This is how things are.
Yeah.
Like this is how I've always known it. XYZ.
Status quo.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would say that the next thing is just to be really aware. Like in your everyday life, what's something you consistently struggle with, and start with that. I mean, journal it, write it down, talk to other people, ask them, do you have the same problem? And then that gives you a really good beginning framework. Now, I'm in consumer. So like the type of problem I'm building is a problem that I would have in my everyday normal life. But, there's some problems in B2B, there's some problems in accounting and all that. So you can also take inspiration from your job. One of the interesting things is that there is a framework for coming up with startup ideas. One of the frameworks is I work at this big company. We built this internal tool to help our company do this thing better. Let's say you're Google and you have, internal search and it makes all your employees 10x more productive. That same problem probably applies to every other company, but they don't have the search experts at Google to build it in their company. So if they can benefit the same, but they don't have the expertise, what if we built search software for our company and other companies that isn't Google? Can that be big? right? And there are companies that do that, but it's just an idea of like, it doesn't have to be problems in your own life. It could be problems that your company or your job is facing. The idea is that you want to extract something small or something valuable that exists within one particular ecosystem and see if it can apply to others, right? And so I guess the last example I'll give is like Stripe, right? They were building, I think it was a mobile app in the beginning. And for their mobile app, they wanted it to have payments. So they started trying to implement payments. And they spent hours and days trying to do payments. And they're like, why is this so difficult? That's when they realized it was a problem. Wait, if it's hard for us to build payments, and they're 2 college students, it must be hard for everyone else to build payments because we're really smart. We went to Harvard and MIT, and it's hard for us to build payments. Think of everyone else with a brilliant idea who is technical, but maybe not as in-depth into payments as we just became over the last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. If that's a valuable thing for us, it'll be valuable for other builders. And so I would say that's the thing. Background and context first. Just be aware. And that opens up your opportunity to identify opportunities. And then just start to search for problems, start to see problems, and try to be as insensitive to them as you can be. Imagine what the best possible version of something would be. So, yeah. Yeah,
no, I really love that. And you outlined that so well. And I love every time people use frameworks because, there's this saying that whatever the problem is, there's a framework to solve the problem. And if you can come up with a framework, the problem is half solved. So thanks for sharing that. That's really great. So finally, we've come up with a framework. We've come up with the idea. We've built something. Now we kind of have to get people to use it.
Yeah.
What are some of the craziest things you did to gain customers? Because there's a lot of crazy stories out there, right? So Airbnb, for example, they came up with the cereal boxes, right, for Obama and McCain. PayPal, they give out free money to people just to get customers. So what are some of the craziest things you did to acquire some of your first customers?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say you can start acquiring customers before you even build a product. So the first thing I did in the spirit of community and bringing people together is I was in New York and I just wanted to hang out with a more diverse set of people because I was interested in entrepreneurship, but all I knew were software engineers. Software engineers tend to hang out with software engineers. So I was like, I want to meet people who are, salespeople, who are marketers. And so what I did was I went on LinkedIn and I messaged a bunch of people in the industry, investment bankers, marketeers, salespeople. I was like, hey, I'm starting this group, young professionals of NYC. We're going to go do activities together, XYZ, like we're going to get to know each other in the city. Are you interested? Whatever, I can add you to the group. And they'd say, yes, I'd add them to the group. So I had this Facebook group. It had maybe like 30 people, good mix, right? And I was like, all right, great. This is going to be my first thing in like planning an activity for a group of people to do together, whatever. And so I made the group, and the first activity I set up was going to be painting in the park. And so I bought easels, paintbrushes, canvases. I had it in this big bag. I took pictures. So everyone agreed. It's like, yeah, it's gonna be so much fun. I think like 9 people said they were gonna go. I'm taking pictures. I'm sending it to the group, whatever. Day of, I go to the park and it's only 2 people there. And they're the people from my Bloomberg office. No one else came. And it was really interesting because I just realized that at the time I was building that to bring random people together. But I realized bringing random people together is not necessarily a problem you can solve with tech, right? Sure, you can do it in a way where it kind of works. But the idea is that maybe it's not a tech problem. If you're just an anxious person and you are uncomfortable meeting new people randomly in the park, me making it easier to meet people randomly in the park may not solve your problem.
Right.
But the interesting thing was the 2 Bloomberg employees that came, or, they were my friends who worked at the office. We together had a great time. And then afterwards, they kept asking me, when's the next thing? When are we hanging out again? That was amazing. That was so much fun. And I was like, wait, this is the first time I've hung out with them outside of the office. And I consider them friends, now good friends. And, you know, that moment in the park was the same thing as the jet skiing. Like, people I already knew, we did this new, interesting, creative thing together, brought us closer. We are clearly craving more of it. But I did all that work and all that hassle of buying the paintbrushes and setting up the easels and all that. And that's when it became clear to me that the real value in what I was building was people that already know each other. How can they spend more time together intentionally, right? Because we thrive as a collective. And I loved spending time with them. I just didn't really think about it. And when I did think about it, it was a lot of work. And so if we can shrink those two things and make it like easier, that is something valuable. It's something we already want to do that you can make easier. So that was one of the first things I tried with like getting customers, like not even before I built the app, before I even thought of it as like outing, it was just me trying to hang out with people in, you know, really cool, intentional way. And then the second thing I'll say really quickly is, I made a meetup group. So this was later. I built a product and I was like, man, how can I distribute this thing? How can I get people to use it? So I made a meetup group. I called it San Francisco Outdoor Adventures. And, you know, it's an open group. Anyone can join. About 200 people joined like the first or second day. And
200 people.
Yeah, like 200 people.
Wow.
Yeah, meetup's really good for that. It's like, you know, it's kind of like a good hack. Like you could just build a community, describe it really well, and people will just join. Like that's the great thing. Because when you look at Meetup, you're like, how is this thing alive? Yeah. That's one of the reasons. They're really good at aggregating people. So I built this thing, or I built this community. Then I would plan outings and I would say to RSVP, here's the outing link. So you need to go to outing on web and you need to book it on outing, and you would come and join the group and we'd go do things together. So Saturdays I was kayaking with a group of old white ladies. They were like 60. I'm the only black person. I'm the only young person there. So they'd be like, so how did this group meet each other? Oh, I make a meetup group. And, you know, I did this a couple of times. But yeah, that was one of the ways that we got people to use the product initially. And it allowed me to be an organizer. Okay, I'm creating outings for others. What do I want out of the product? Now, when people are creating outings for their own group, for their own friends, I have a clear understanding. So that was one of the other interesting ways we did to acquire users. Yeah.
You know, I love that though, because when you think about acquiring customers, customer acquisition cost, it's so high, right? But everything you kind of mentioned didn't have that much of a financial commitment to it.
Exactly.
Which is so great. That speaks a lot to your curiosity and your creativity. So shout outs to you for that. I really love that. So in that same spirit, you built a lot of things, which from what I'm hearing, doesn't sound like there was a lot of financial commitment to it. Someone might be listening to our podcast and saying, you know what, I've had this idea for 16 years. I've had this idea for a long time, but I haven't been able to do it because I just don't have the money to be able to do it. What would you tell someone like that?
I would say that tech allows you to scale, but it doesn't make you have value day one. Value can be as simple as inviting people on LinkedIn to a Facebook group and then inviting them to go to the park and paint, right? It could be value day one with no product, especially now where you have all these tools that allow you to spin something up quickly. It's a lot easier to kind of get something up. I would say, you know, the startup doesn't make the problem valuable. The problem is already inherently valuable, and there are already low friction ways to test out how it can be valuable. So, you know, for example, with Airbnb and their first version of the product, what they did was they rented out their own home to people who were at a design conference because it tended to sell out. They weren't even thinking about it as this big startup. They were thinking about it as, here's this problem that we know that other people have. We need a little extra money for whatever they were doing. Let's just rent out a room. So they rented out this room, and the story goes, you know, the first 3 people that stayed in that room became really great friends with the founders. And that was the impetus for the idea. It didn't require a mobile app. It didn't require a huge listing of supply, whatever, just to know it has value. So I would say, and here's the thing too, everyone can get caught in a trap, especially even now. Like, of like, I need to build this, this, and this before it's useful, before I can get people on it. Reverse that. What's the simplest thing you can do to bring 1 or 2 people value? Then once you do that, the interesting non-intuitive thing is that it gives you so much hope that you could just like, you can feed off of that for a long time while you're getting the scalable thing right. So for me, those first few outings, because building an app takes time, building a website takes time. Once I noticed like, hey, there is value here. I've literally done it for this group of people. I see once I do it, how much they crave this type of experience. I viscerally remember it from hanging out with them. Now, when it takes me 1, 2, 3 months to build a product, I'm motivated the whole time. Because I just know, right? Like whether I get the product right or not, this problem's valuable. Even if this version of it is wrong, I know it's valuable because I did it with no tech. So that's what I would say. Just what's the non-scalable, quick version of anything that you can build to just get it out the door? And that's another thing. It's like the activation energy is the highest. It's the idea that I'm going to have to do this to make this thing happen. And that's what makes it delay. When all you have to do, like let's say, your Airbnb, if all you had to do was make a Craigslist posting that I have a room open, it's so easy. You could do that next weekend. Now, what are you waiting for? Right. So I would say what is that first, dirty version that you can get out tomorrow that is like super simple, that requires no tech. And if that exists, and it could be as simple as a video. Here's a video of me explaining what the problem is and what an ideal solution would be. Do 3 people comment and say, that's so cool, I want that? Is it, a video of a mock on a Figma? So before I even built the app, I literally built the whole thing in Figma. So Figma is this design tool you can use. And I remember I took it to a party and I was just showing people. I was like, oh, look, like whatever. It looked like the real app, but it was just like Figma designs. And they were like, are you fundraising?
At the party?
At the party. And I became one of our first investors just from the Figma design. It wasn't live yet. I hadn't built it. It looked like the app, so they could visually see what it would do, and they were interested. And so, we had a live version of the app, but that was the newer version that I had built, whatever. But I didn't tell him about the live version. I was just showing him what I was building next, and he was just really impressed. And so, I just realized I could have actually not even built anything and made this Figma and showed enough people, and I could have started with that. Because at the end of the day, what I like to say is people don't know what they want, but once you show them, they know what they like. And so that's how I think about products.
No, that's really awesome. And I hope someone that's listening can definitely learn something from this, because a lot of the gems that you've dropped, very low cost commitment, which is great. And so a great way to start, just build something, build the minimum viable and get it out there. And, hopefully it gets some traction. It's not easy, but at least you get started. And I heard this thing the other day, which said, what people want to see, or people that are looking for your idea, what they want to see is that execution, at least. Because if you just come up and start talking about something, okay, sure, I'm probably not listening. I'm probably a visual guy, and you're just like talking up my ears. But then if you come and show something, even if it's not built out, just seeing your execution to say, you know what, okay, this guy has an idea and he's kind of made it tangible. It doesn't work yet, but at least I get where this guy is going. That alone could get you the first person that can help, like in your case, right, where you go to a party and you show people and they're like, are you fundraising? You were probably not even thinking about fundraising at that point. You were just like, yo,
I was excited.
You're like, show people, what does this look like? And they're like, wait, are you fundraising? Right then you're probably like, oh, hell yeah, I'm fundraising. Right? Because it's like, and that's the point of, just being able to execute and being creative and, putting things together. But thanks so much for sharing that. So another thing that I wanted to dive into is sort of the type of leader that you are, right? So leading the startup right now, what would you consider yourself? Are you more of a visionary? Are you the numbers guy? Are you the executor? Where do you fall in the?
So I think when running a startup, at some point you have to be everything, but there are some things you naturally lean into.
Yes.
And so for me, I would say that I would consider myself, I think naturally, I feel like I'm a visionary because even back in college, like when I had nothing, in the sense of like, I really wasn't that great at programming yet. I really wasn't, I didn't have this huge track record of building things. I didn't really know anyone who built things, but I was really confident that I was, going to be able to build a company. And I remember even just like thinking about my life, I was like, I'm going to go to Silicon Valley. I'm going to be a software engineer. I'm going to do this. And my friends thinking like, sure. Like, you know what I mean? Like, well, yeah, sure. And later they're telling me like, yo, bro, everything you were saying happened. Everything you were saying came true. And a lot of it is like that background and that context to know, like, when you study so many products and so many companies and how things started and how they went, it's easy to stay grounded and to think big because, most of the things that are huge and massive and big started small and often started with people who didn't even have a big vision in the first place. And so there were a lot of things back then that, I literally was the type of person where I would just be daydreaming. And like you're talking and I'm just thinking about
you're like a giant with their head in the cloud but their feet is on the ground,
right? Yeah. And sometimes like to get your feet in the ground, you just got to start and it'll quickly level you, right?
Yeah.
Like you have this big vision and you start and you're like, oh, wait, I'm not that good yet.
Right.
Let me come back and get good.
Yeah.
And then in terms of executor, I think that's the one I struggle the most with, ironically. And the reason I say that is because I feel like as a CEO, I'm very good at going narrow into one thing. Like I could program for hours. I can design for hours. As a CEO, I feel like one day your attention needs to be here. You need to fundraise, and that's sales.
Yeah.
The next thing you need to get customers, and that's marketing. And then the next thing you need to design the product, and that's design. And so when I'm context switching like that, I feel like it's really hard to execute at a high level at any one of those things. And I think like that's the one that I kind of struggle with the most.
Yeah.
And in terms of being a numbers person, I think just the nature of my educational background makes me a natural numbers person compared to most people. I studied applied math, computer science. I went to grad school, studied, master's in computer science. Like I'm just naturally a numbers person, but I would say I lead with vision. Then the math is just something that I've, naturally acquired through my studies. And then third, being an executor, you just have to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I used to wish that I could just like lay in my bed and think and make things happen.
Neuralinks.
Yeah. I can't wait.
You might need that chip in your head.
Sometimes I have no energy. I'm like, man, okay, like this needs to be done. But I don't want to get up right now. And so the executor part for me is a struggle. But I think every entrepreneur, like being an entrepreneur means the hard part about it is there are so many things to do and it requires such a diversity of skill set, even when you're working with others, that you're going to meet your demons. You're going to meet the things that you are not good at.
Yes. And
you're going to need to do them. And that's just what it is. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I've experienced a fair share of that on my entrepreneur journey so far. And you got to be constantly learning and you got to be curious, right? Yeah. Especially you're the visionary for the idea to begin with. And so it gets to a point where maybe what you're telling people, they hear you, but they don't see it.
Right.
And sometimes you might have to become a designer. Sometimes you might have to become an artist. Sometimes you might have to be, a manager and give hard critical feedback, and to your point, you're always, switching here and there, and you really have to be dynamic.
Yeah.
And I hope someone is not listening to this also and feeling like this is so daunting, right? Because if we really deconstruct your story, you started really small and you built on top of that gradually, right? And that's kind of, I like how we've had this conversation in a very systematic way, right? Yeah. So we start with your internship where you're doing very menial things and then you gradually stack up and stack up and stack up. And now you're up here at, Silicon Valley. And I hope someone that's listening to us can sort of put all of that together and realize it's not necessarily about looking at the huge mountain and saying, am I ever going to get there? That's not the point. The point is try to figure out what is the one step you can take today to get a little closer.
Yeah.
You might not get to that goal, but you might get a little closer, right? You might just get to that party and that one person might be like, oh, is this what you're looking for? I got you. I can help you out. It's just starting small and then building up. It's so important because especially, and I keep repeating this, but with social media today, it's so difficult to figure out and say, you know what, I'm going to start small. It's going to take some time. You know, even when I'm not winning, I'm going to keep going, you know, because you really just, like you really just expect to win and you're expected to win. And no one is saying you should be a loser. No, that's not the point I'm making here. The point is you have to realize it takes time. And as long as you don't quit, you're going to hit some momentum, right? And I heard someone explain momentum the other day and it captured me so much. He said, momentum is just a bunch of little moments stacked up together and then it becomes momentum. I was like, oh my God, that's, it sounds so simple, but that enlightened me. I was like, wow, that's literally what I'm looking for. Yeah. And so as you're getting these small moments, and when I listen to your story, there's a whole lot of that, right? Whether it's organizing and bringing people to a park, you're probably feeling like, man, this is so weird. Like I'm behind these paints and bringing these people together. Like, what is this going to come out of? Yeah. But that was one moment and that moment led you to another moment and another moment. And then it just stacks up. And that's how you become a winner. Small wins stacks up and then you become a winner. And sometimes we're not kind of thinking about things this way.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, as you mentioned it, what happens to those small moments and the momentum are a story. And then the story gives you more leverage in the future because me being able to tell that, it tells you like, this guy will do anything. Like he will just embarrass himself. He will spend his own money. He will, you know, after showing up and there's only 2 people there, keep going. He didn't stop. And it becomes the story and that inspires people too to join. You know, I was inspired early days by some of these large companies because they've had some moments where I think, you know, most of us don't even know about, right? Like early days DoorDash, they were driving the cars. They were picking up the orders. They were sending it to the customers. Early days Airbnb, you know, when you're talking about like the cereal boxes, they needed to do that because they were in credit card debt and they couldn't get funding at the time. And that was the way they were going to make funding. Yeah.
Talk about early days, Steve Jobs. Speaking of early days, apparently the first iPhone, the App Store, nothing worked. They had the phone, but nothing worked. And they're like, what the heck is this? Like we've created this thing, but people can download stuff. They can connect and make calls. Like nothing really worked. Speaking of early days.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, the little moments matter in that they're the plot. First he started doing this, then he did that, then he did that, then he hit this. And because if you swing big and you're successful on the first go, right? That's cool. Yeah. But that's not most people.
There's no character,
right? There's no character development. You can't really build a story. And like reality is most of us can't do that. Someone who started from nothing and built is relatable to everyone, to people who have, to people who don't, because all of these people are valuable too. And if they're going to join your startup, if they're going to work at your company, if they're going to be a part of the journey, feeling a connection to the origin story matters. And so, I would say, like you said, baby steps. What's the next step? What's the next step? Because it's hard to see compound growth in motion. Yeah. Today, it looks like nothing, but each step compounding becomes something very quickly.
Yeah. So let's probably the last topic that I kind of want to dive into, but it's more related to building wealth, right? And one thing that kind of inspires me to pursue entrepreneurship is the opportunity to be able to build wealth. And the way I think about this is if you have a job, Andrew goes in today, creates a wonderful app. It's like, okay, Andrew, your salary is $170,000. Great job. You created this app that's increased productivity by 10x. You're still going to get that Maybe at the end of the year, your raise is going to be nice.
Right.
The upside is kind of limited, right? When you're in that corporate America environment. And there's nothing wrong with that, because if you look at Steve Ballmer, the guy is actually richer than his boss now.
Yeah.
And the reason he's richer than his boss is he was an employee. So there's nothing wrong with being an employee. That's not the point I'm driving at.
Yeah.
But I'm saying the upside to being an entrepreneur, is that something you think about? Does that give you some sort of like inspiration at all?
Yeah. So early on, I was thinking about successful people, right? Artists, musicians, entrepreneurs, athletes, XYZ. And I was trying to think, what is the common denominator for all these people when it comes to like wealth? And to me, the conclusion I came to is that they all produce. They've all created things that we all can consume. So if you're an athlete, yes, you work really hard, but the value of what you do is in the entertainment. It's being recorded and distributed to millions of people. It's making them laugh. It's making them cheer. That's the value. And so, to me, when you're an employee, you're creating for the company, and they're figuring out how to distribute the value to everyone else. But when you start a business, you're figuring out how you can go straight to the source, how you can distribute value to a bunch of people, and you get direct value from that. When you create one thing that is useful for 10 people, it's easier to scale it. Or when you create value for like 10 people, you can scale it to 100 people, you can scale it to 1,000 people. But when you're an employee, you're creating the value for them, and they're figuring out how to distribute and scale it. And so to me, I just knew early on that if I was going to be successful, I needed a body of work. I needed to create something. That's the only way to build wealth. And so, I thought about like Kanye, right? Like, he's just, in my mind back then, I was like, okay, like, business is this tough thing, and there's all these skill sets and whatever, and musicians is this completely different thing, and it's this creative thing. Like why are all these people like massively successful? What's the common denominator? And I realized with Kanye, he has a body of work, like a lot of work. And you look at an unsuccessful musician, the biggest difference is always going to be they just don't have that much work out. And so to me, that was like really important, because I was like, okay, if I'm going to be really successful, I need to figure out how to create, how to be a producer early on. That's why I was building apps. That's why I was making stuff. And so that gave me inspiration to just don't be a consumer, right? Like, just don't be on Instagram scrolling.
Dude, I'm actually getting chills thinking about this right now. But you know what's crazy? It's a line. It's one of my self-talk. Like, if I'm not producing, if I'm consuming too much, then I'm not producing enough. And I always think about that, because I consider myself a creator, right? Whether I'm creating for GWP or something else that I'm thinking about and creating whatever it is, I consider myself a creator. And don't get me wrong, there are times that I get sucked into all these things, whether it's, because one thing also with being a creator is sometimes you kind of need to know what's going on out there. And so I'm looking at things, what's going on, and I get into a rabbit hole, and I'm watching sports and all this kind of stuff, and you get lost. Yeah. But then as soon as I remember, okay, you're consuming too much. If you're consuming, you're not creating. Right. It's like, it just brings me back to, okay, you got to go back and create. Yeah. And for people that are listening to us, it's so important to be able to balance the two, right? Because we've gotten so good with content creating that you can just get, and when I'm talking about content, I'm not just talking about scrolling on Instagram. I'm talking about Netflix, the content on there, everywhere. Like, and we've made the content also so accessible that you can spend a whole day and not know where the time went. Yeah. Just this weekend, I started my day with a call, which the call was probably like an hour. And then after that, another call. I tend to use my weekends to make all these calls, whatever. But then right after that, I got into the scrolling, and by the time I looked, I woke up at 7 for my first call. By the time I looked, it was 11, and I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Where did the time go?
Right.
And today is Sunday.
Yeah.
And I'm still thinking about that time.
Right.
I'm like, what did I do with that time? Because I need that time back.
Yeah.
And it's so critical to realize, even the Bible tells you, like, time is evil. It's going to keep flying. And if you don't do something with the time, you're at a loss.
Right. Exactly. And like, you know, today, like you said, it's incredibly easy to consume. But there's a flip side to that. It's incredibly easy to distribute now. Like, more people are consuming more than ever. That means less people are creating, but for the people who are creating, they're getting more distribution. And so it's one of those things where it's a challenge. And I go through the same thing where I, like, if I don't catch myself, I can zombie scroll for 2 hours. Right? Like, I can be on the internet for 2 hours.
Oh, zombie scroll. That's the first time I'm hearing that one. I like that.
It's just like when you're so tired,
you're just
like, you're not
just
even
in
thinking
it.
about it. You're just in it.
Yeah.
And so, to me, production is the highest correlation of someone who is wealthy. I can't think of a single wealthy person that hasn't produced at a high level. And sometimes the production doesn't need to be a large body of work. Sometimes it's just a piece of work that is highly complicated and important. But at the end of the day, the result is the same.
Yeah.
You need to put the hours into producing. And right, like, and people overcomplicate it and all that. But at the end of the day, like, make a video. You educate someone, take something you learned and make a video. Make a couple of videos and consistently put it out. Build an audience. And once you have an audience, then when you build the next thing, that's a base of people you can start with. And so to me, that was what inspired me early days, was I need to be building. I need to be active. Because, you know, like, it's easy to think like, oh, this person's just famous because they're, you know, they know the right people and they did a concert and they got famous. If Kanye brought you on stage right now and you performed at the show with him, all of your content, like, people would discover you. And then the next thing is, what do you have for them to consume? Yes. If you have nothing, you're that gone. Moment is fleeting and it's gone.
Yeah, you're going to be the Hug Tour girl.
Exactly. And so you need body of work and you need content. That's, like, to me, it's like a prerequisite to wealth and to success. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome, man. This has been such a great conversation. So one last thing that we like to ask every single one of our guests is, what is your definition of wealth?
My definition of wealth, I would say, is getting to spend the time doing the things that you value that brings others value and doing it at a high level. And then that's it. Because doing things for yourself, at the end of the day, it's not as useful, because whatever value I create for others is amplified and brought back to me. Right. And so every major successful company that I can think of, they're not rich because a lot of people gave. They're rich because they gave to a lot of people and received in return.
Yes.
So that's how I think of wealth. It's just like the value you create, that you spread to others, that you give to others. That's how I define wealth to be.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about today that maybe I haven't brought up yet?
Let's see. I guess I'll just touch really quickly on, like, what the product is. So, as I described, Outing makes it really easy to discover private group activities. We think community is everything. We thrive as a collective. And so the whole core of the product is people that you already know, that you want to get to know at a deeper level and create memories together. We've assorted a wide range of collections and we put it in one place, and we made it easy to book in 60 seconds. And so whether you're hanging out with friends, your partner, a friend visiting town, to us, it's the easiest way to create moments in life, because quality time is one of the luxuries of life that we often overlook, you know, and for us, it's the thing that is the most fulfilling. And so we're just happy to be working on that mission. And if people want to check us out, joinouting.com, check us out. But yeah, man, I'm super happy to be here. on the pod.
Yes, sir.
And I love the conversation, man.
Yeah,
It's
same,
super exciting.
same. So I did check out Outen. Super cool. And one of the things that you mentioned is, I think, spending time with people, because when you hear some of these stories where when people are, sounds a little morbid, but when people are dying and you ask them what are some of the things you wish you did more of,
Right.
a lot of times they wouldn't say, I wish I made more money. They're not going to say, I wish I, did this and that, went to some useless places. A lot of times they're going to say, I wish I spent more quality time with the people that I love, or I wish I had more richer experiences.
Right.
And if you want to know how important something is, and if someone is saying it when they're about to pass,
right,
that is how important it is. And that's kind of what you guys are doing, which is so incredible. And so thank you so much for taking on that mission. To be honest, it is so great. Like, bringing people together to enjoy some of these activities, whether it's like bowling. I've seen some of these like videos of people just laughing and having a good time. And all of that was put together by Outen. And so if you're listening to this podcast, Outen, Outing, join Outen, right? That's the
joinouting.com.
Yeah, joinouting.com. Check it out. My man, Andrew, thanks so much for coming on.
Appreciate you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, man.
This was so much fun.
Yeah, same here.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Cool.